For so many conversations on BizBlend listeners, we have talked about the conscious founder, the entrepreneur who builds from purpose, not pressure. But we are expanding that lens today because consciousness doesn't stop at leadership, it's reshaping marketing too. Well, I'm your host, Sana, and this is BizBlend, and today we are stepping into a new era. One where the loudest voice in the room doesn't always win, and hype has quietly lost its halo. Buyers today are more discerning. They crave substance, not slogans, authority, not arrogance. And that's exactly where and what today's guest embodies, listeners. Back in 1992, Mike Konrad founded Aquis Technologies, an equipment manufacturing company in the electronics industry, almost by accident. And what began as one man's defiance turned into a lifelong lesson in humility, transformation, and conscious entrepreneurship. From chest thumping ads to credibility driven marketing, Mike's journey mirrors the evolution of an entire generation of business leaders. And in an age where authenticity sells better than hype, his insights couldn't be more relevant. So, listeners, let's begin into this explorative conversation. And Mike, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really excited for this one.
Thank you, Sana. I'm excited to talk to you and your
Yeah.
listeners.
Yeah, super, super. Okay, so Mike, before we begin to understand about conscious marketing, let's try to understand the shift here. Um, and you have seen marketing evolve across decades, from megaphones, billboards, magazine ads to now credibility and content. What, in your eyes, marked the turning point where hype stopped working?
I'll tell you exactly the moment we decided to make
Okay.
a shift into a different style of marketing. But let me just build up to what brought us to that moment. We were, looking back, I can honestly say we were obnoxious advertisers. We would run ads that would almost to the point, I'm exaggerating slightly, but almost to the point where
Mm-hmm.
we said, we are the best, the rest are the worst. And uh, talk about, you mentioned chest thumping ads.
Thumping, yeah.
Yeah, it was me, us. And, we were braggadocious, we were obnoxious, we were everywhere all the time. And it worked, I guess, because we got orders, our company was growing. But I think it worked in spite of our ads, not because of our ads. Then the moment that caused me to make a shift was we were at a trade show. At the time, there were about a dozen trade shows in the US and others around the world. And we went to our biggest trade show. It was in Southern
Mhm.
California. And every year, Sana, we would get uh, uh, a bigger and bigger booth on the show floor, and we would put things in the booth just to attract attention. So some years we would hire magicians to do magic tricks in the booth, and
Wow.
video games and waterfalls and just stuff that has nothing to do with our line of business
Okay.
in the
Uh,
electronics industry. But it was we wanted to attract attention. Look at us, look at us.
mhm. Yeah.
And we had all of our equipment laid out in the booth. This was opening day, and I had rented this enormous waterfall at the back of the booth, which instead of dropping
Wow.
just sheets of water, it
Uh-huh.
actually had several thousand nozzles at the top, 16 feet in the air, 30 feet wide, and it dropped words and images shaped out of water from the top of the waterfall. And it was quite amazing. And
Okay.
all of our equipment, which we put on wheels when we do shows so we can move them around more easily, um, they were in front of the waterfall and it looked beautiful. And
Mhm.
someone came up and asked if permission to take a photograph
Mhm.
of the booth because they said this is the most awesome display I've ever seen,
Mhm.
referring to the
Yeah.
waterfall. And we said, sure, of course. We were proud. So of course you can take a photograph. And then he noticed that our equipment was on wheels, and he said, "Mike, do you mind if can you just roll your equipment out of the way so I can get a better picture of the waterfall?"
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Okay.
I said something similar, in my head,
Uh-huh.
a little more coarse than that, and
Yeah.
I realized at that very moment, it just hit me over the head like a mallet, um, like a sledgehammer, that what are we doing? We're basically, those same people, the carnies that you see in carnivals, carnival barkers, and say,
Yeah.
"Come to my stand, let me take your money." We were them, and we don't sell waterfalls, we don't build waterfalls, they have nothing to do with our industry, and yet, we were so distracted by trying to attract people through
Mm.
shtick, through hype, that
Mm.
we lost our way, and at after the show was over, I met with our team, and we had come to the mutual decision that we're gonna stop all advertising, traditional, conventional advertising like we were doing. We're gonna stop it
Mhm.
all, cold turkey, right now, and we're gonna
Mhm.
immediately stop exhibiting at trade shows. Canceled the rest of the year's contracts with our shows, canceled our ad contracts, um,
Okay.
and we had a blank slate in front of us. So, we decided that the best form of marketing that would both stand out, because not too many people were doing it, and be more useful, would be something which I coined conscious marketing. Now, it turned out, even though I thought of that phrase, it turned out many other people had already thought of that phrase. Once I started
Mhm.
looking into it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I invented this phrase that's already been invented." But, and the idea behind conscious marketing is to provide value, not hype, value. And I
Mhm.
learned quite counterintuitively that the best way to sell our products is to not talk about our products. No one cares about the
Mm.
specs of our products. Um,
Mhm.
we serve an industry in the electronics assembly industry that is having a very specific, highly technical issue that affects the reliability of their products. And the products that we build and sell resolve that issue. However, the industry at that time, and even today for that matter, really doesn't draw a line between the problem they're having and the cause of that problem. So they wouldn't even think we were a solution because they don't understand. Um, so we realized that, what we need to do is stop talking about our product and start identifying and connecting with the customer on a more emotional, valuable level. So we
Mm.
took all the energy from advertising and email blasts and trade shows and things like that, and we put it into workshops, non-commercial technical
Mhm.
workshops. We put it into non-commercial technical webinars. Um, when I refer to trade shows, I always refer to there's upstairs and downstairs at every trade show
Mhm.
in the world.
Okay.
Downstairs is the exhibit floor. That's where all the
Yeah.
carnival barkers
Right.
are. That's where all the equipment
Right.
lives and all the
Yeah.
salespeople wanting to scan your badge and call you forever after that. And upstairs is the technical conference. That's where
Yeah.
engineers go to learn and speak, whatever they're doing. And I realized that we were on the wrong floor. We need to go upstairs, not downstairs. Nothing wrong with being
Okay.
downstairs, but the way we were doing it downstairs was bad. So I immediately switched over to an education model. And we started
Mm.
speaking at conferences, started writing white papers, started, um, I travel around the world speaking at conferences now, all about reliability, which is what we're in the business to improve,
Mhm.
and what is causing our industry's technical issues, reliability issues, and what the best practice solutions for those issues are. None of our presentations even had a photograph of our equipment. We don't talk about that
Mhm.
because we're not ready to talk about that. They're not ready to hear that at that point. So then we eventually started podcasts on the subject of reliability, and we became unintentionally an
Mhm.
an authority-based influencer. And I hate the word influencer, Sana, because
Okay.
When I hear influencer, I think of, kids on TikTok, or,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Paris Hilton and Kardashians and all that. And
Yeah.
yes, they are influencers because they are influential. But we wanted to have an authority-backed influence, and we needed to build trust with our audience that when I'm speaking at a lectern or behind a camera and or a microphone or writing a paper or hosting a webinar, that
Hmm.
we're not there to sell. There's a time and place for that, but that's way down the road. What we're there to do is educate. And over the
Exactly.
last 10, 12 years that we've adopted this model, we have, um, our company has grown almost exponentially. And more important, it started attracting a different type of customer. The customers that we were attracting when we were carnival barkers, um, many were toxic customers. They were very needy.
Yeah.
They didn't maintain their equipment. They demanded discounts. So we didn't make much money on them, and it cost us a fortune to support them because they didn't support, they didn't carry their end of the bargain. And
Hmm.
when we switched over to this education model, we started attracting customers which really wanted to partner with us, not just transact with us,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so that's a very long answer to your very short question of how we got to where we are now.
I think this was necessary, and I have so many questions, Mike. Uh, okay, let's rewind everything. I'll come to one by one each of the questions here. So, not exactly questions, but more of thoughts. Mm, so I think the transition, that moment of realization for you was something like the shift that we are actually witnessing in terms of let's say audience who wouldn't want a big budget movie with full of opulence and grandiose, but they would like for a content which they can connect with, which they can enjoy, and also they can relate with. Something, this kind of shift that you actually realized within. um that's what I believe. I kind of deduce from that. Now, next, one question that comes to my mind, Mike, is mm, the conscience marketing. Is it as equivalent to responsible marketing, as in, or responsible messaging? Is it safe to say that both are same?
Yeah, if responsible is trying to trying to connect with your customer,
Okay.
on a less transactional basis and
Mm.
form a relationship built on trust, then
Mhm.
yes, I think that's highly responsible marketing. Um, Conscious marketing is just a term. It probably means different things to different people
Mhm.
because the opposite is not unconscious marketing. Although in some ways it is because it's just wash, rinse, repeat. It's just doing the same thing over and over again.
Mhm.
Conscious marketing is really understanding your industry and building that authority and connecting on a much, much higher level than a transactional level would connect on.
Absolutely.
So to do that, we have to be completely disconnected from the sales process.
Hmm.
What we do is kind of the field of dreams approach, build it and they will come.
Mm.
We don't have to tell people why they should come. We just have to build what they're looking for. And
Exactly.
and we have to trust that they will see that. You know, it's becoming easier to do this now because of younger generations than myself. So, we
Okay.
we talk a lot about millennials and Gen Zers
Gen
and
Zs.
and whenever I start a sentence with the phrase "kids these days," I feel like I've immediately become my father. And well, because he would always say when I was young, "Kids these days," but it was not as a compliment. It was usually as a criticism.
Criticism,
Um,
yeah.
but younger people learn differently. I grew up, I was 4 years into my business that I
Uh-huh.
started before the internet came out. right? So,
Oh, yeah.
I started in 92. The internet became more widely available in 96.
Yeah.
And, and so I, had all of my childhood and much of my young adult life without internet. So I would read ads. That was kind of my only way to get information on something I was interested in, was to read
Yes.
in a book or a magazine or an advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
Today, there are an entire generation of young people, young adults, that did not grow up with that. They grew up with the internet already there, and
Mm.
and younger people are not convinced by advertising. In fact, they probably don't even notice advertising, or they skip
Mm.
over it, or they block it, or whatever. And
Mm.
what younger people tend to do is seek out solutions either on YouTube or TikTok, God forbid, or whatever. Um, but they seek out their own solutions. They will not pick up the phone necessarily and call a company and ask questions. They they want to find the answers themselves, and the resources are bountiful for that today. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and these young people, we can criticize them and say, "Oh, their faces are always in screens," which may be true, but it's not all watching twerking girls on TikTok. They're researching, they're learning the way of the world through a 4-inch screen, and
Yeah.
that is just the way it is. So we need to be on those 4-inch screens to provide value. And one thing I've
Absolutely.
learned,
Mm-hmm.
Sana, is if I tell Sana, you need to buy this. This is the greatest, blah, 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 blah. You have to
But
believe me. And
yes.
if you go out on your own and look at value-based educational content and come to the conclusion that this is what we need to get this. Everything I've researched tells me this is what we need to use. And the people
Mm.
who are talking about it, you have trust in them. They're influencers in your world. Once you come to that conclusion and you determine that is the best solution, you become a super fan. You will go to your
Mm.
boss and give a compelling case that they need to invest in this product or technology or service, whatever the case may be. And
Exactly.
today, younger people don't just buy products, they join tribes.
Yeah.
And, how many times do you see someone walking around with a Nike swoosh on their hat or on their shirt? They're wearing the brand,
Mm.
right? They're
Yeah.
not just buying the shoe, they're wearing the brand.
Right. The brand. Yeah.
And, and speaking of Nike, were probably the early adopters of conscious marketing. And, I
Mm.
didn't realize this at the time, but if you think about it, have you ever seen a Nike ad on television, online, in print that talks about how comfortable their shoes are,
Nope.
or the
Never.
quality of the
Never.
leather, or the
Nope.
arch support, or soles?
No.
Never. In fact, some of
Never.
their ads, they don't even show a shoe. What do they
Exactly.
do? They celebrate athleticism
Athleticism. Yeah.
and athletes in all different regards. And they don't even talk about their shoe. And they have
Yeah.
created a couple of generations now of super fans. People join the Nike tribe. Apple did that. I think they've lost their way a little bit, but Apple did
Yeah.
that, where,
Did it?
people would line up in tents for 3 days before the latest iPhone release, which was marginally better than the last iPhone release, but they wanted to
Yeah.
be early adopters. Um, when you buy a Mac, I'm a Mac guy, so I know this. So when you buy a Mac, they give you a sticker of an apple
Exactly.
because they expect me to, I don't know, put it on my car or my forehead or something. I don't know. But, but, you know, once you become that super fan, once you join the tribe, then you will carry their torch. You will tell everyone who will listen how much you love that product or that service. And you can't advertise your way to that, by just talking about yourself. You have to really talk about your customer and get that connection so that, oh, they get me. When I buy Macs because I do a lot of content creation, and Macs are really
Mhm.
good for that. And
Yeah.
when they design their products and they talk about their products, they talk about creating content. They talk about art, and they talk about things that not just processor speed, RAM memory, you know, whatever, resolution. Those are things that are there, but that's not what they lead with. And
Mm.
Patagonia, same way. And there's several companies that are really catching on to this. And that to me is conscious marketing, because educated people make educated choices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think and one particular point that you mentioned, the authority backed influencing. I think we can also, it's safe to say that it's more as an impact making through educating and creating that awareness, giving that experiential learning, like as you mentioned about the trade show, that you would go to the engineer conferences and try to understand and kind of interact in their language. The products would interact in their language. So I think that is something that it's very safe to say. And also, Mike, what's let's say um in a noisy marketplace, where everyone, even on social media, everyone is trying to grab eyeballs and to catch attention. Sometimes through some really naive or very out of the box marketing. Sometimes we do see advertisements like that, and people say that any kind of publicity is a good publicity. What's one practical step a small business owner can take, who would have restricted budgets, or they would feel overwhelmed competing with the bigger brands or enterprises? What step they can take today to pivot from hype driven to credibility driven marketing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did it
Mhm.
because we just got sick of the sound of our own voice, and
Mm, mm,
we just needed to do something different. Um, if someone wants to do that more proactively and not wait for the building to be burning down before they jump out of the window and try something else, um, they need to trust the process. The process
mm,
works. Bigger companies than mine have determined that. Um, think about who they follow. If they go online and research problems that they're having, which most people do, either through ChatGPT or something similar, or Google
yeah.
or YouTube or whatever, think about how do they research something? How do they feel when they see someone that's pushing a product more than educating? Does it turn them off? Do they switch to another channel? Do they swipe
Mm,
up and go to the next video? That's what I
mm,
do. And even though I kind of discovered this and jumped ship and just changed course immediately,
mhm,
it turned out I already knew that. I already experienced that in my life,
mm,
but I didn't really think about experiencing that type in my company. Um,
mm,
I research things a certain way, and I don't think I'm incredibly unique. I think most people today, if they're at all tech savvy, online
mhm,
savvy, that's the way they do it. And if you just think about what causes you to connect to a person or a product or a company, was it the ad in a magazine that talked about their greatness and how many awards they won?
mm,
Probably not. It's probably going to be they touched you some way. They came through the screen, they jumped off the page of the magazine, and they connected with you. And then you started searching for more. And the more you searched, the more you found. And the more you found, the more you connected. You joined their tribe. Ask yourself, if you're a tribe person, if there's a brand that you
yeah,
just love, whether it's a car or a computer or anything, a piece of clothing, um, what connected you to that? What,
exactly.
what did it? Um, One really good example is Coca-Cola, and I'll make this real
Mm,
quick. Coca-Cola in the 1930s, 20s, 30s, and early 40s
mhm,
discovered that, during the wintertime, their sales dropped because, of course,
Uh-huh.
it's a cold drink,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And their ads were all how refreshing Coca-Cola was in
Refreshing.
summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beat the heat, try
Summer. Yeah.
Coca-Cola. And
Yeah.
this was the days before air conditioning and all that, so it made sense. So they hired an advertising agency to say, "What can you do for us to help us sell more Coke during the winter?" And they came up with a campaign, which they still use today, and it involved Santa Claus. And
Ah.
before that time, there was no universal image of Santa Claus. Some um, versions of Santa Claus had him look more like a homeless vagrant,
Okay.
and this was largely the days before a lot of color ads and things like that. So sometimes you
Uh-huh.
brown or whatever, and they said no, we want to equate um, Christmas time, which in many parts of the world was a significant holiday, not as
Mm-hmm.
significant as it is today. Back in those days, Easter in Christian-based
Mm-hmm.
countries, which predominantly are Christian-based, they celebrated Easter way more than Christmas. So
Mm.
Coca-Cola redesigned through their ad agency what Santa Claus would look like. They made him a little fatter. They made him jolly. They gave him red cheeks. And most importantly, they dressed him in what color?
Red.
Red. Red.
Yeah.
By the way, that was Coca-Cola red. That's the same exact shade of
Oh.
red that was on their logo. And
Ah.
they started equating Christmas time with Coke because it would have Santa eating a cookie that the child left out and drinking a bottle of Diet Coke.
Mm.
And that actually, after several years, caused Christmas to be by far the number one holiday in countries which celebrate Christmas. And that was
Yeah.
Coca-Cola. Now think about it, Sana. If Pepsi had thought of that first, Santa would be dressed in a blue outfit.
Blue. Exactly.
But that's how influential Coca-Cola was. They changed not just selling more of their product during the wintertime. They
Mm.
they created the modern image of what Santa Claus, this, magical imaginary figure that comes from St. Nicholas way back. They created the whole image that we still use today. Every mall, every shopping center in many countries over the holidays hire someone to dress up in that Coca-Cola red Santa suit. And
Yeah.
and that came from Coca-Cola. And they not only changed how their product sells, they changed the culture of much of the world. And that was conscious marketing. And that is what is conscious marketing and the power of it.
Wow. Wow. I think, oh my goodness, yes. I think whenever we are trying to understand something, listeners, I think more than just the theoretical aspect, I think the best way to learn is through examples. Um, and I think, Mike, you have done a superior job in that. I really, really, really enjoyed this conversation. And of course, before we wrap up, if our listeners they would like to connect with you or they would like to listen to your podcast, what would be the best way?
Well, there's a few choices. My podcast on the subject of entrepreneurship is called the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. And people can find that at reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com. And then if they really want to drop down the technical rabbit hole and go deep into technology and electronics and reliability, um, less interesting, but if you're not in that space, it might be less interesting. But if you have some electrical engineers that, in your audience, that would be Reliability Matters podcast.com. And each of those
Super,
websites has links to me in it. So,
super, super. So, listeners, I'll have all the details in the show notes for all of you. So, just refer to them along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And if I can um, summarize this conversation, I think This really felt like a mirror, like really getting back to the basics of marketing and reflecting not just how it has changed, but how we have. Once upon a time, it was maybe about being the loudest in the room, but now it's about being the most trusted. And listeners, Mike's story, the transformation, that reminds us that conscious leadership and conscious marketing share the same foundation, integrity. Because when the hype fades, credibility, compassion, and consistency are what remain. So, Mike, thank you. Thank you so much. Really, really, this was such an inspiring and very, very super learning podcast as an episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sana. Thanks for inviting me on the show. And I appreciate the efforts that you're making through your podcast to change the world, make it a better place.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, for encouraging words. And to all the founders like Mike, proving that humility doesn't silence success, it sustains it. Until next time, this is Sana reminding you, in business and in life, authenticity isn't a strategy or a buzzword, it is your superpower. Thank you.